This video is an apology to Sam Harris. I made a video a couple days ago called Sam Harris is Wrong About Black Lives Matter and Police Brutality. And it's not so much that I figured out he was right, but I realized that a lot of, almost all of the stuff that I used as reference material, or the stuff that I heard that influenced me to make that video, was taken out of context. And this is thanks to, a comment that someone left on that video that pointed me in the direction of a full interview that Sam had with a guy named, I think his name was Glenn Laurie. And, even though a lot of the quotes and content that I saw came from that video, came from that interview. That interview was not presenting them in a way as, Sam saying, "Hey, I'm an authority on this topic, and this is what needs to be done, or this is what's obvious." It was more of an open sort of question and answer session, and so I was gonna originally just pull the video down, but I felt like that was a bit of a cop out, and I think the video still had some useful material because there are people who think that way, and I think the video still pertains to them, right? Also, I just want to point out that I think the conversation you had with Glenn was extremely important, and Sam, I want to commend you for doing that in an honest and open way. To be honest, sometimes it feels like people in your situation don't care enough about this topic to talk about it, or they're too afraid of possible backlash, and it makes it hard to have an honest discussion about a solution, and thus it makes the problem harder to fix. That being said, there were a few questions that you asked in that podcast with Glenn that Glenn gave great answers to, but I would like to add my 2 cents to them because I think they're commonly asked questions, right? So the first question was, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, whose idea was it to, to sort of almost chastise people whenever they say, "Hey, I'm racist. I'm not racist. Sorry, I have a black friend." And Sam, I got the impression that you were in the camp of, hey, if I have a friend who I love and respect, and he's black, that's probably a good indicator that, I harbor no ill will to black people, right? And the response to that, Glenn gave a very sort of elaborate response to that. My response to that is, I want to use the woman's sort of struggle to vote, the women earning the right to vote as an example. So women kind of recently gained the right to vote, right? It's less than 100 years ago, right? And quite a few of those women were married. Right, and I'm sure if you asked the majority, or I can't say the majority, but I'm sure there were definitely a camp of their husbands who, if you asked, "Hey, are you a sexist? Don't you believe in equality for women?" Those men would say, "Don't be ridiculous. I have a wife, right? He would say, I have a daughter, I have a sister, whoever, who I love and respect. Of course, I'm not a sexist." And I hope you and anyone else who struggle with this question could see immediately how this equates to to saying, "I'm not racist. I have a black friend." Obviously, a lot of these men would not see themselves as being sexist. They would see themselves as believing in fairness for women. They just felt that the role that women should play in our society needs to be different from their own, right? And obviously they did, because it wasn't easy for women to get the right to vote. You had the women's suffrage and a lot of heroic people who made that a thing, right? So hopefully that answers that question to anyone else who's struggling with that. There's a bunch of other examples, but I love the women right to vote example the most. So the next question that you asked, Sam, it revolved around the stat that black men commit close to 50% of the homicides in the U.S. And the question was, there was a lot of discussion around that, but the one of the questions that you asked about that was, are you racist for pointing that out? Are you racist for just simply reading the stat? And the obvious answer is no. But the thing I think a lot of people fail to realize, and I think the thing that isn't communicated with that stat is it is misrepresentative, right? And it's also loaded. It's a loaded stat. What gets confused in this stat in saying that 50% of the homicides of black males is a confusion between causation and correlation, right? So being black doesn't cause you to commit crime, right? Having a certain amount of melanin in your skin isn't the reason, isn't the cause of you committing a crime. Now, there could be a correlation there, right? But not causation, right? So it's like, let's say you figured out that a high percentage of pedophiles have mustaches, right? As an example, having a mustache isn't the cause of being a pedophile. And if you turn on your TV one day and you start hearing, and you hear the term mustached pedophile, it's a bit ridiculous, right? It's and all it does is put a target on the backs of decent men who just want to rock a fashionable mustache, right? Especially when you put it in the context of, even amongst the men who have mustaches, the amount of them who are pedophiles are probably less than a percentage of 1%. And so creating a stigma around all those men when 99.99% of them are not pedophiles and have nothing to do with pedophilia, it isn't fair, right? And it's the same context when not just black, but when you use race as an identifier or a classifier for criminality. The solution to that, I don't think that means you have to not use race as a classifier. It just can't be one of the most important ones. You need to add, for example, talking about, level of education or economic status, that's probably far more impactful on whether someone is going to be, whether someone is a criminal or is going to be a criminal or not, than the color of their skin, right? Even the amount of parents that person has, is probably far more impactful. So, to answer your question, no. Simply reading the stats does not make you a racist. Using the stats to justify police brutality or justify black people being treated differently by the cops, especially since being black or having a certain level of melanin in your skin doesn't cause homicides or criminality, that is racist, right? Okay. The last thing that I wanted to comment on was black on black crime. Even with the homicide stat, one thing that came up was the victims of most of these homicides are other black people or other black men, and usually the conversation around that goes something like, "Well, why are you making a big deal about police brutality and police killing black people when so many more black people are killed by other black people, and you need to be making a big deal about that instead, right?" And I just want to make something clear before I comment about this, because I actually have a comment about what I think is the best way to go about reducing black on black crime, even though it is a very big and very complicated and very sort of societal driven problem that to sort of eliminate completely is going to take a lot of thought and a lot of effort from brilliant people. But I do think there's a surface sort of Band-Aid almost that will help the situation quite a bit, and I'll tell you what that is in a little bit. But what I want to address right away is black on black crime and police brutality are completely different issues, right? In the same way that, and I mentioned this a little bit in my last video, but brain tumors and cancer are completely different diseases. And if anytime someone started talking about a solution to brain tumors, you wanted to defer them to cancer and how many more people are affected and killed by cancer, that would be ridiculous, right? It would just wouldn't make sense. And deeper than that, it'll show a sense of a lack of concern for people who are affected by brain tumors, right? So that applies similarly here. When black people start talking about police brutality, to try and defer them to black on black crime, it has the same effect. It doesn't make sense, and it says something about your concern for what they're going through, right? Okay, so what do I think is the best way to sort of reduce black on black crime? And again, this has nothing to do with police brutality. This has nothing to do with, police choosing to treat people differently because of the way they look, because of the color of their skin, because of the amount of melanin in their skin. But I think the best way to go about reducing it is by making a conscious effort to increase trust or reduce distrust between police and the neighborhoods that they're supposed to be watching over, right? And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second, really quickly. But the second and the thing that I would consider a Band-Aid a little bit way to go about reducing black on black crime, in my opinion, is to work on dissolving this culture of no snitching. And I want to make it clear that I don't think that the people who sort of live by that rule or follow that way of thinking are idiots or irrational. Or I think it's perfectly rational to, if you view the cops as a threat or as an enemy that is a bigger problem than the murderer or criminal in your neighborhood, then yeah, there's absolutely no reason to try to go to the cops who do not have, or at least you perceive as not having your best interest at heart, to try and to deal with an issue for you, right? So, but the reason I think the way this needs to be approached is to have the people who practice sort of no snitching understand that there is a much deeper consequence to to the whole no snitching culture. Not only does it let a criminal who's more likely to continue go about committing crimes stay on the street, but when you decide to take matter into your own hands, that only increases the crime rate. So even though you may not perceive the cops as being much help or having your best interests at heart, it still makes sense to bite the bullet and do what feels like it's irrational and go to the cops and at least make that attempt. And listen, I'm not advocating anyone breaking the law, but making that attempt, you could then say, at least I tried that, right? And I think if more people are willing to try that, you're going to get a lot more criminals off the street, and that in turn is going to reduce crime. Now, that is a Band-Aid, and it's a hard pill to swallow because, like I said, there is a lot of distrust, some warranted, some unwarranted, between cops and the neighborhoods that they should be watching over, especially the black neighborhoods, and I think a lot of responsibility for increasing that trust, it does fall on the cops' shoulders, and so the community could sort of work on dissolving this anti-snitching culture. And I think the cops could work on increasing trust, and the way to go about doing that, one is, I think good cops need to stand up and disown bad cops, right? They need to cut this nonsense out about we're brothers and it doesn't matter what you do, and no, it's like you're a public servant, and if you really are a good cop, and one of your guys does something bad, then they should be punished in the same way that a citizen would be punished, right? Because that creates a lot of distrust in the community when people see bad cops doing bad things and getting away with it, right? I also think cops need better training, and this is probably the biggest one. You hear it pretty often. And I think I'm going to end the video right here and saying cops need to learn how to not identify race as a cause for criminality, which we talked about a second ago, and they need to learn how to put stereotypes and expectations aside and treat people on a case-to-case basis. It's hard, and it's a hard job, but that is not an excuse to do it wrong. In fact, that is more of a reason to do it right. Hard jobs are the ones that especially need to be done right, because usually they're hard because they're important. So yeah, I think those two things are sort of the Band-Aid that will sort of help reduce crime in the black community. Obviously, it goes a lot deeper than just distrust with the cops. A lot of this stuff is systematic. A lot of the culture. The reason why the culture is the way it is because certain incentives point in certain directions, and But I think those things will help quite a bit. All right, thanks a lot. If you made it this far, which I'm absolutely certain no one did, thank you for listening. Have a good day. Bye.